Well, good morning. This is Jim Gleason. We're here talking this morning about new franchises versus franchise resales with Indiana Business Advisors. But we're going to be talking about whether you should be looking at a new franchise versus a franchise resale, which is better for you. So let's get going here. A little bit about me. My name is Jim Gleason again. I'm with Indiana Business Advisors. A little bit about Indiana Business Advisors. IBA, we've been in the franchise brokering business for about 36 years, the oldest and largest brokerage in the state of Indiana. During that course of time, Indiana Business Advisors has sold somewhere over 2,000 businesses, so got a lot of experience selling businesses. And with Indiana Business Advisors, we have 16 brokers. I'm one of those. We also have Ed Meisglan, who's our valuation specialist. He's the guy that if somebody's looking to sell their business, he can tell them what it should sell for. We have Chelsea, who's just here, that got my screen going again. She's our marketing director, and Alyssa, who's our admin, who just started about a month ago. Uh, I'm a senior business advisor with IBA. I've been here for about 5 years now and sold a number of existing businesses. I've sold a number of franchise resales, and I've also sold new franchises. So I've been on both ends of that. And as a franchise consultant, I've been in the franchise consulting world for going on 13 years now. During that time, the franchises that I sold have been for the first 10 years were all new franchises. So have experience both selling new franchises and existing franchises. So what's the difference between a franchise resale and a new franchise? And as we go through this, some of the things that you're going to notice is that there's going to be some overlap between the things that are positives or some of the considerations of both because they're franchise businesses, and so we would expect that there would be some similarities and crossovers here. So anyway, what is a franchise resale? Basically, what you're doing is you're buying an existing franchise business as a going concern from a franchisee with the rights to operate the franchise. Pretty straightforward. Somebody's already bought that franchise, and for whatever reason, he or she has decided to sell that business. And there's all kinds of different reasons. They might be ready to retire. Might be reasons that they're selling the business. They might be ready to retire. They might be looking for another business. I've got a young couple right now that I'm working with, and they've been in business for about 11 years, I think, and they've done very well, and they're just ready to move on. Now, with the franchise resale, it could be the sale of the company or the sale of the assets of the franchisee's business. More often than not, it's going to be the sale of the company because if we just sell the assets of the business, that's all that's going to remain, and there's not much of a business left. In fact, I had a situation probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it was a food franchise, and the person that bought it just wanted the assets of the refrigeration, the stove, those kind of things, but he also wanted the space that it was located in, and so he bought the equipment and opened up a brand new business there. So basically, most time the franchise resale is going to be an existing business, a franchise business that you're going to buy from the franchisee. That franchisee might have bought it as a new franchise, or he or she may have bought it as an existing franchise. So let's take a look at who this appeals to. It might appeal to a previous franchise owner, and it's kind of interesting. These two factors here can also apply to a new franchise. So previous franchise owner, maybe they've had some experience in operating a business, a franchise, and they're looking to operate another franchise. And another one of my clients that I sold a franchise to, helped get into a franchise business about 10 years ago now, and they've done very well. They are, in fact, looking at buying another franchise in a completely different industry. So they've been able to be successful at one business, and they're looking to expand into another business. And the reason they're doing that, looking at a franchise business again, is they want that roadmap. It's in a completely different industry. And so they want that roadmap. So someone that might be looking at a franchise resale also might want that roadmap. And again, a new franchise would provide those same things because the franchisor will provide that roadmap, whether it's an existing franchise or a new franchise. So why would somebody consider entering into a franchise resale? Well, one of the biggies is because of positive cash flow. You're going to start a business, you're going to go into this business, and hopefully the business has been profitable and it's got a positive cash flow, so you don't have to start from zero. You've got some income coming in. You might be able to take that money and invest it back into the business, buy some more inventory, buy equipment, maybe hire new employees, or maybe even pay yourself, which would be a great thing. So another reason to enter franchise resale is it has proven systems, and this is one of those overlaps. This applies to the franchise, new franchise as well. Basically, if you've ever looked at franchises, one of the biggest reasons that you're probably going to be looking at a franchise is because of the proven systems. It's got processes and systems in place for operations, for sales, for marketing, for all different types of things that help to make that business successful. And the idea here is that you don't have to do a lot of experimentation to find out what works, because the franchisor, through their development of the franchise systems, have shown what works. They know that what types of social media works for marketing. They know what type of person they should hire in terms of an operations person. They know the demographics that are going to take to support that business. So all that stuff has already been worked out, and you don't have to experiment with it. So that's one of the reasons somebody would enter to a franchise resale. Another biggie, really a big one, is having established employees. We've got a situation right now. We have low unemployment, and all the time we're talking to business owners here, or business buyers here, that when they're looking at an existing business, are the employees going to stay? And that's one of the things with the franchise resale, is you don't have to try to find these employees. Chances are there's employees, and there's a good possibility that the employees will be staying there. So that's a real plus on a franchise resale. The other thing is it has customers in place. The franchise has been out there for a period of time, whether it's a brick and mortar or one that's more of a service franchise, but it's developed a customer base, so that provides those people that are going to help with that positive cash flow. Another reason people look at franchise resales, it could be attractive to lenders, to bankers. So a lot of times when somebody's looking at buying an existing business, franchise or otherwise, they're going to need to look at getting financing in order to be able to buy that business. And if it's a business that's had a positive cash flow and been profitable, very likely it's going to be appealing to lenders in terms of being willing to invest money into that business. So what are some of the considerations, though, that we need to take a look at also? And this first one is a big one. Very, very limited choices. If you want to open a dry cleaner, and if you want to buy a dry cleaner in, say, Avon, Indiana, and you want to buy it as a franchise dry cleaner in Avon, Indiana, the only way you're going to do that is if there's a franchise dry cleaner in Avon, Indiana that's for sale. If there's not one for sale, you can't do that. If there's one for sale in Greenfield, Indiana, that's not going to help you because you want to be in Avon. So there are very limited choices with franchises, and it also limits the number of industries you can look in, because you can only buy from industries that have a franchise for sale at that point. Another big one is with a franchise resale, chances are you're going to have to stay within that existing territory. For example, if you are looking at buying a franchise resale of, say, a healthcare business in Fishers, Indiana, and the territory in that particular area goes to 116th and Allisonville, for example, and you're wanting to open up at 126th and Allisonville, the franchisor may say, no, you can't do that, even though it's just a couple blocks away. You need to be in your territory. Now, there might be some flexibility with that, but certainly if it's a brick and mortar franchise, in other words, you're going to buy a franchise that has a retail presence, chances are you're going to buy it where it exists, and take that lease over. You could, if it's within the territory, if you wanted to move it, you possibly could do that to a new area within that territory. But then you have to consider, would it be out of the way for employees to get to? Would you lose your customer base? So there's a good chance you're going to want to stay pretty close to, if not exactly where the business has been located. Another one is franchise or funding is unlikely. There are some franchises that the franchisor will help with funding of the franchise, but it's almost always only new franchises. And quite honestly, franchisor funding or financing is fairly limited. There aren't a lot of franchises that do provide that, but the ones that do are almost always only new franchises. However, you might be able to get owner financing. In fact, when you're buying an existing business, an existing franchise, you'll probably want to talk to the owner about picking up some of the financing on it in order to keep that owner involved in the business for a period of time while you make that transition. Another thing with the franchise resale are their rules and royalties, and this is the same thing with the new franchise, and we'll address that. But with the franchise, there are rules that you're going to have to follow. The franchisor is going to make those clear to you in their franchise disclosure document and in the franchise agreement. And there will be royalties that you're going to pay. Typically, the royalties are based on top line revenues on a monthly basis. The royalties, on average, as probably in the 4 to 12% range, but I've seen them as high as 25 to 30%, and I've seen them as low as like $350 flat. But there are going to be royalties that are going to be paid because that's how the franchisor makes their ongoing income in order to continue to be a franchisor. Another thing with a franchise resale is you may have to do upgrades, particularly if it's a retail location. You might have to buy new equipment. If they're during the period of time when that franchise was originally open to where you're at now, they've maybe done some changes in branding. You might have to do some new signage, might have to do some new interior, new equipment. There could be a number of different things that you might be required to do. And so when you're looking at buying a franchise, a resale of a franchise, that's one of the things you're going to want to check out is, am I going to have to do upgrades? Because that's going to be in addition to the cost or the investment in the franchise. So you have to keep those things in mind. So let's talk about new franchise. Basically, a new franchise is starting a new franchise business, typically in a new territory. And I put typically because more often than not, it will be a brand new territory. I had a case a few years ago, however, where there was a franchise that somebody bought in a territory on the northeast side of Indy, and they didn't do very well. In fact, the franchisor took the territory back because they weren't performing, turned around and sold it as a new territory about a year later, had the same situation. So basically what they did is they cut off that territory for about 2 years to give all the negative publicity about that franchise to settle down, and then they resold it in that same territory. But more often than not, it's going to be in a new territory. And one of the things about franchises, when they designated territory, they pretty much know what kind of demographics it's going to take in order to support that franchise. So they'll help you find an area that is going to have the population, the income base that's going to be able to support whatever that franchise is that you're purchasing. So who does this appeal to? Again, it appeals to some of the same people that are looking at a franchise resale, but also people with an entrepreneurial mindset. Now, one of the things to understand about franchises is that you do have to follow, as I've said, and we'll talk about it again, follow the rules and royalties. There are systems involved. So if somebody's a true entrepreneur, chances are they're not going to be a good fit for a franchise, because somebody that's truly an entrepreneur is somebody that's got their own ideas and they don't like to follow anybody else's ideas. They like to come up with their own thing and do their own, come up with their own business type of thing. But somebody with an entrepreneurial mindset would be a good fit. Back in 2007, 2008, we were seeing, and we still see, a lot of corporate executives, corporate refugees we call them, that have left or maybe been downsized from a corporation and look at franchising as a good way to get into business, because as the old saying in franchise goes, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So why would somebody enter into a new franchise? Well, there are a lot of choices, as opposed to very limited choices with a franchise resale. With a new franchise, there are somewhere in the neighborhood of like 4,000 different franchises in about 80 or 90 industries. So there are a lot of choices out there. So that sometimes that even becomes an issue. How do I figure out what's a good match for me? And we have a process we take our candidates through in order to help them figure out what would be a good match for them in terms of a franchise business. Going back to what we talked about earlier, it does have proven systems. Again, it has the processes and systems in place that are going to make it successful, that you as the business owner are not going to have to do a lot of experimentation trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Could be possible territory flexibility. In fact, there's probably going to be a lot more flexibility territory-wise with a new franchise, for the simple fact that if I want to open a business in Fishers, Indiana, I can say, okay, I'm going to open a business in Fishers, Indiana, and if that franchise has territory available there, and you have the financial means to do so, and you meet the other qualifications of the franchise, you'll be able to open it in Fishers, Indiana, or Greenwood, Indiana, or wherever, as long as that territory is available and you fit the other criteria. You're going to be able to establish your own business and local reputation. So with the franchise resale, you're going to take on some of what that franchise has developed in the area in terms of reputation, which could be good, it could be negative, but you're going to establish your own reputation because you're starting from scratch, which also means you're going to be able to develop your own culture within the framework of the franchisor. The franchisor is going to have some influence on the culture of your business by the simple fact, again, going back to the rules that they have in place, and the brand that exists. But you're going to be able to establish your own framework. Uh, Franchisor is going to provide you with the training. And this is a good thing because the franchisor knows what works and what doesn't work. With the franchise resale, you'll also have this available to you. In addition, there's the training that you might get from the person selling the franchise. So there's a little bit of an advantage there in the resale. But the training by the franchisor, that's the key here in order for you to move forward and be successful as a new franchisee. Some of the considerations here, there is no cash flow. There's no positive cash flow. So when you're opening a franchise, you have to prepare for a period of time where there's not going to be any income from that business. And that period of time is going to depend on the franchise. I tell people to expect a minimum of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, maybe more, depending on the franchise. So when you do start looking at a new franchise, that's one of the considerations you have to look at is, okay, how long am I going to be able to continue in business with no cash flow? Do I have the financial wherewithal to do that? And that's a big consideration in looking at a new franchise. Now, this next one, projections are based on franchisees' results, other franchise results. And this is a good thing. It's a consideration, but it's also a good thing. You're going to have the opportunity to talk to franchisees, people that are doing today what you would do tomorrow should you buy that business. And when you're doing this, you're going to want to talk to people, other franchises that are in demographics similar to where you're going to open your business. In other words, if I'm going to be opening a business in a suburb of Indianapolis, I'm probably going to want to talk to people that are in suburbs of maybe Columbus, Ohio, or Nashville, Tennessee, or Oklahoma City. In other words, in demographics that are similar to Indianapolis. I could talk to folks in downtown Chicago or downtown New York City, but chances are the demographics are going to be so dramatically different that you're not going to get a good feel for how the business is going to perform in your area. You are going to have to find your own employees, and in an economy with low unemployment, that does become a challenge. But at the same time, you get to determine and define who you want as employees. Obviously, you're going to have to develop your customer base. You're going to have to go out there and get your customers either through social media, through advertising, through your retail location. If it's a franchise that requires you to get out and knock on doors and do some sales, you'll have to do that and develop that customer base. Again, you're starting from scratch. Now this one, no correlation between investment and income. This is an interesting one. In franchises, there are franchises that actually, go down to very, very low investment models. But basically the ones that I'm most familiar with and work mostly with, they're probably going to be $80,000 on up. And when I say no, there's no correlation between investment and income, that's true. You don't have to spend a lot of money in a franchise business to make a lot of money, because there are a lot of service franchises out there that do very well, but they don't have a retail location, so they don't have the cost of a build out or equipment or those type of things. You might be able to operate out of your home, or you might be able to operate out of a small office space or a shared office space. I know a young couple that is in such a franchise. I think their investment was somewhere, it was 80 to 100,000, and they've been in business for about 10 years, and they are a multi-million-dollar business now. So those are the kind of things to keep in mind. There are rules and royalties like we talked about before. That's just the nature of franchising. You're going to have to follow the rules, and you're going to have to pay the royalties. Another thing with a new franchise is the franchise is going to have a price that that the business is you're going to have to spend to get into the business, and there's not going to be much of a negotiation, if any at all. Their franchisor is going to tell you that the business franchise fee is this, the additional costs are these, and here's your all-in cost. Kind of take it or leave it. So that's something that you need to be prepared for. Okay, so there were a couple questions submitted earlier. One of these is, to what degree are franchise agreements negotiable? I'll start off by saying there are some franchise agreements that are not negotiable at all. The franchisor is going to say, take it or leave it, and that's the way it is. This is more typical of franchises that have been well established, been around for a long period of time. With some franchises, the investment, the royalties, all those type of things, there's not going to be any negotiation on those type of things. But you might be able to negotiate something such as territory, get some additional zip codes. You might be able to negotiate a situation where if somebody's moving into the territory, you have the right of first refusal. If they're moving into a territory next year, you might be able to negotiate and have the franchisor let you know that somebody's moving in, and if you want to buy that territory, you might be able to do that. So those are a couple things that might be, but and again, there are other things, but it's going to depend on the franchise. Another question: what terms and conditions are best to avoid or limit? Most franchise agreements are going to have minimum royalty requirements, and also requirements that if you do go out of business, that you might have to pay royalties even though you're out of business. So those are some of the things that you and your franchise attorney might want to be talking to the franchisor about to see if there's any way you can negotiate those. What are the legal aspects of franchising? Let me spend a few minutes on this. Franchising is a regulated industry. It's regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. And there are states, in addition to the Federal Trade Commission, that have additional regulations beyond what the FTC requires. Indiana is one of those states. Illinois, California, there's about 14 or so states that do have additional regulations. So you've got the franchise disclosure document that the Federal Trade Commission requires to be published every year. It's called the FDD, Federal Franchise Disclosure Document. Within that franchise disclosure document is the franchise agreement. Now, the FDD is written in everyday language, but it's a very long document in that it could be anywhere from 100 to 200 pages long, and it has 23 different items in it. I'm not going to go through all those various items, but it does have all franchisees that were in business at the time that this FDD was published, and it has to be, again, published every year. And you, as a candidate looking at franchises, have the right to talk to any of those franchisees. It also has the background of the owners, any litigation, all the costs are in there. And the thing to understand about a franchise agreement in the FDD, they are written very much in favor of the franchisor. So if you get very far into franchise, whether it's a new one or a resale, you're going to want to have an attorney that's familiar with franchising look at the FDD and franchise agreement, because if you have an attorney that's not familiar with franchising, they're probably going to tell you not to do this because of the way the documents are written. But if you get an attorney, and I know several that are familiar with, those are a couple things another question we had was the length of the obligation, or the length of the franchise agreement. I assume that's what the question is. Most franchise agreements run anywhere from 5 to 10 years. A lot of them are 5, 7, or 10 years long. And then there's a fee to sign a new agreement. And are there performance requirements? Yeah, most franchises do have performance requirements, and if you're not meeting those performance requirements, the franchisor usually does have a contingency that they can terminate the franchise agreement. However, if you are out there and you're trying, the franchisor is going to want to try to work with you to make your business work. It's a lot less expensive, a lot less headaches if they can help you get that business working than to have to shut it down and then open up a new franchise. So don't let me see. I think that's the only questions we have for right now. If you have any questions that you want to send afterwards, just send them to me, and then we can shoot an email to you with the answers. So this year we've covered Guide to Buying a Franchise, where we talked about franchising basics. We had Josh Brown, a franchise attorney, talk about the legal aspects of buying a franchise. We had Kevin Hall of the State Bank of Liston come in and talk about financing franchises, and we have had Capricia Turner with Mosquito Squad talking about being a franchise owner. So what's going to happen for 2020? What I'd love to do is get some questions from you all out there. If you would send those to me, be glad to answer those questions. What we do is if we get enough questions, and we're going to try to send this out to our entire database, not just to those that are on the call today, but to the entire database, so we can see what questions we have, and we hopefully can develop a webinar just around those questions, kind of a frequently asked questions webinar. We'll have some other things. We'll probably do another one on basics of franchising, or the legal or the guide to buying a franchise. But we'll also have some other things that we'll put on an agenda of some of the things that we're going to be looking for to do in 2020. So here's my contact information. Again, you can email me at jim@indianabusinessadvisors.com, or you can call me at 317-218-8961. Appreciate your time today. That's about all I have, and wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. See you in 2020. Thanks. Bye.